Hello and welcome. In this video, we will walk through step by step how to create a Gantt chart visualization in Sigma Computing with a date scaffold. First of all, the inspiration of today's video came from this week's Workout Wednesday challenge, where we are handed over a project management dataset to create this Gantt chart style visual. However, once we start to interact with the solution guided by the original challenge itself, we see that there are some white items, some white bars being highlighted as we hover through this chart. This is because the original solution is built with relative dates and the project length to kind of translate the original flat table into a Gantt chart style visualization. At the same time, by doing this translation sort of thing, we will only have access to relative dates rather than the actual calendar dates in the x-axis. Today, we are going to learn a new way of building this Gantt chart with the same data, but with this date scaffolding approach that allows us to eliminate these two issues. Here is how the final product looks like. We no longer have the white bars being highlighted as we hover around, and then we will have actual date objects in the x-axis of this Gantt chart. Now, you have heard me using the term date scaffolding a few times in this video. What does it actually mean? For me, date scaffolding is a way of transforming the shape of a table into an easily digestible format in front of our BI layer to understand the relationship of dates. For example, in our source table of this Gantt chart, each row has a unique task as part of our bigger project, with two columns specifying the start and the end of the specific task. Now, as human, we can understand that between the start and the end date of each task, we will be working on this task every single day in between. However, this relationship is not that easily readable in front of our BI layer. To create calendar-style visualization in any BI platform, we really need to translate this relationship, this consecutive relationship between the start and the end of a period into a taller format or table to feed in and provide more flexibility in creating visualizations. Now, let's take a look of how we can build this in Sigma Computing. To start with, here are the two tables that we are going to need to create this data model. On the left, we have the same table you just saw from the Excel sheet. There is every single row representing a task, specifying the start and the end date. Over here, we have a all dates helper file that is supposed to be an agent in between this flattened table we have here and our final output. What we really want to create here is a cross drawing that isn't really native in Sigma's original offering. To do that, we can trick the system a little bit by creating a new field in each table, and they basically should be the same record for every single row to match. You're going to see how this is going to work out eventually, but let's start by creating this helper column. We are going to use the formula true to fill every single row of the table on the left. Let's just name it true flat. Over here, we're going to do the same thing. Use true to populate every single row. And we are going to name this true date helper. Let's create a drawing between the two tables we just published. First, let's select the flattened project table. And I want to join that with the date helper file to create a taller output table. We want to create an inner drawing and use the true column to match the true column in both datasets. This way, we will be able to mimic that cross-join behavior in Sigma. Let's go to preview output. Now we see we have 423 rows. That's basically the product of every distinct date throughout the project period, and the count of projects. We don't need the true columns to appear in the final output, and we should be good to proceed. And now let's sort this table a little bit so that it makes a little more sense to look at. Let's first sort by the project start date, and then group that by every unique task. Then sort again by the every single consecutive dates. Now let's create that column that offers the extra context about what is happening to the specific task on a given date. Let's define a custom formula if the date of, the all date, which is a field from the helper file, equal to the start date of this task, then this cell should say project starts. Else if this all date master column equal to the end date of this project, I want this cell to say project ends. Oops, let's keep the format consistent. For all other instances, they just should be all others or others, doesn't matter. Let's see what we can see on this custom column here now. Let's name it period start end. We see the very first task of this project is to define business question and stakeholders. That project starts on this date and continue on the second date. It ends on the 18th. Does it match the original flat table? Yes, it starts on the 16th, ends on the 18th. Let's check another task. Got the requirement. It starts on the 21st, continue through the 22nd, and ends on the 23rd. Does it match the original flat table? Yes, it does. Now we can start using this transformed taller form of table to create the Gantt chart we are trying to create. Let's start by creating a child element as a chart. Now, the original Workout Wednesday solution built it with relative dates and the length of the project, which can be done with the stacked bar chart. However, in our case, we have consecutive dates, and then we have this context column saying the start and the end of the project. What we really need is a line chart. If you are surprised, we're going to see it happens very soon. We really need a line chart to make a line between the start and the end of that of that task for each task of the project. We're going to change the chart type into line and then drag the master all dates column into x-axis. We want to have dates represented horizontally. And then drag project into y-axis. Now we don't want to aggregate projects. We want it to be a dimension, be basically a placeholder in this case. We are going to utilize the trellis functionality. We are going to drag the task into trellis rows. Let's first make this chart look more compact. And for that purpose, let's actually move it to a new page and make this larger. Nice. Now, what is happening here is each dot is a row of the 423 rows we created after that cross drawing. And some of them represent the project start, some of them represent the project end, and all other points are just useless information. What we want to do here is to remove those dots in this line that are not useful for our purpose. What we want to do here is to create a filter to eliminate all of that others and only keep the project start and the end. Now, this chart is making a lot more sense than before. If we focus on the tooltips over here, we can see the first task is define business question and stakeholders. It starts on the 16th, ends on the 18th. The second task is gather requirements, starts on the 21st, ends on the 23rd. To make that easier, let's actually sort by the start date of each task. Oop, I did it the wrong way. Now they're all sorted, and let's start removing the noise in this visualization. First, the row border, and then we have this useless project name that we can remove. Now, the task name are actually jammed into this very tiny space vertically in this y-axis-ish space. And this is just how Sigma decided how that trellis is going to work. It is not perfect. To solve that, let's try to represent the task name in some other ways. And we are going to do it with labels. Let's create a new calculation. We know that each line is basically structured by two dots. If we just put the task name into the label, we are just going to see task name at the start and at the end. We can give it a quick trial. And we don't really want to see this repetitive information, right? To solve that, let's create another if statement. If the period start end equals to project end, that's where we decided that should look like, then you should give me the task name. In this case, we're only going to see one task name for each line. Once again, this chart still doesn't look perfect. Remember the original challenge? It's a bar, not a line. Originally, I thought this is doable by making the line thicker, because that's how I usually do it with other BI platform. But in this case, I can show you how that works, and I need to find my line style. There we go. Now, if we max out on the kind of the thickness of the line, it is just a little bit different, still not a bar. So this solution doesn't really work. However, what we can do to make that visualization aspect is by using the reference band. Let's try to create one. We want to create per chart. We are basically specifying we don't want one reference band for the whole Gantt chart. We want separate reference band for each line or each task at different rows, because we were creating this with trellis earlier. We want it to be applied to the x-axis. Now is the fun part. How do we define when does it start and when does it end? Let's create a custom formula. We know for each task, the bar or the band, at this point it doesn't matter, should start on this project start date. How is that information represented in the table? We need an if statement, if period start end. Sorry, that's not a string. Period start end equal to start project start. then you should return me the date information, which is the all date column from our table. This would define the start. Now let's define the end, which will be a similar logic. If that period starts end equal to project ends, then gave me the date information. Now we can see for each line or each row of our task, a bar-like reference band is applied to our visualization. Now this thing look not so great. Let's change the band color into something we prefer. We can make it pink. Actually, let's make it blue in this case. And now we see the lines are actually popping out. Because this is a line chart, we can't really remove it. But what we can do is to change the color of the line to make it look like it's hidden. There we go. Now we have this Gantt chart that visualize the period starts end of each task, but we no longer have that white bar being highlighted because right now those items or those objects are filtered out of this view by using this period starts end filter. We are only keeping the start and the end and not everything else. Similarly, we are seeing the actual calendar dates on the x-axis, and they are no longer the relative dates. That comes to the end of this video. And now I want to hear from you. Do you prefer the Gantt chart made with the relative dates or the Gantt chart made with the date scaffold? Before we wrap up, I do want to say there is no ultimate solution. Both methods have some flaws here and there, but they are really just offering a different user experience depending what you are trying to do. The relative date method is easier to make. However, it does offer that limitation. The x-axis is going to be relative dates rather than the actual dates. In comparison, the date scaffold methods gave you a lot more room to play around with different calendar style visualization and potentially offering an actual level of information and context for each given day. However, it takes a little bit more time to do, and you will have to create a new data model by cross-joining the flattened table to a helper file with dates. That's it for now. This is Stanley on Data, and I hope to see you in the next one.